Have you ever felt your heart whisper something your mind couldn't understand? A quiet voice that speaks not from logic, but from the soul, a calling so pure, it shakes the foundation of your identity. For one woman, this whisper came when she was carrying a life within her, 10 weeks into pregnancy, when her heart led her to the truth that would change not just her own destiny, the destiny of her unborn child. There are moments in life when silence speaks louder than words, and in those moments, the heart begins to see what the eyes cannot. This woman's journey began not with a grand revelation, but with an inner restlessness, a quiet discomfort that grew stronger with every heartbeat of the little life inside her. The world around her was loud, opinions, expectations, doubts, but deep within, there was a stillness calling her to something greater. Pregnancy itself is a state of transformation. The body changes, the emotions deepen, and the heart opens. But in her case, that opening became a doorway to faith. Each time she felt her baby move, she wondered about the source of life, the unseen power that created something so perfect within her. Science could describe the process, but her soul longed to know the creator behind it. And it was through that longing that she began to listen, not to the noise of the world, but to the rhythm of divine truth echoing within her. She had seen Islam before, but never looked closely. She had Muslim friends who prayed with calmness she could not explain. Their peace intrigued her, but she dismissed it as cultural until one day she watched one of them pray, not for show, but with tears. It was in that moment she saw something different: surrender, beauty, humility. She realized that prayer was not a ritual, it was communication, a direct connection between the human heart and its maker. Something inside her broke, or perhaps it awakened. That night, she couldn't sleep. The rhythm of the Quran that she had once heard faintly in the background of life now echoed inside her heart. It was as if every verse whispered a secret only her soul could understand. You are seen, you are guided, you are loved. But the journey was not easy. She was 10 weeks pregnant, and fear surrounded her like a storm. What would people say? How would her family react? Was she strong enough to walk this path alone? The emotional waves were powerful: joy, fear, confusion, surrender, all at once. But in the quiet moments of prayer, she found peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that removes all pain, but the kind that gives meaning to it. As she placed her hand on her growing belly, she whispered, "I am not just giving birth to a child, I am being reborn too." That realization changed everything. Islam became not a religion of restrictions, a sanctuary of wisdom, mercy, and balance. It taught her that faith is not the absence of struggle, but the art of finding light within it. As weeks passed, she noticed a transformation not only in her soul, but in her motherhood. She began to see her pregnancy as an act of worship. Every moment of discomfort became a reminder of divine mercy. Every heartbeat of her baby was a verse in her personal revelation. She began to understand that the one who formed her child in the womb was also forming her heart through faith. Submission was no longer something to fear. It became a form of freedom. Through her tears, prayers, and moments of doubt, she discovered that surrendering to Allah did not make her weaker. It made her stronger. For the first time, she felt fully alive, anchored, calm, and purposeful. There were still moments of loneliness. Not everyone understood her choice. Some questioned, some judged, and some walked away, but she realized that faith often begins in solitude. It was in the quiet moments of sujud that she found companionship stronger than any worldly bond. She was no longer alone. She was carried by the same divine force that carried her unborn child. She learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to follow truth despite it. Every day became a new lesson in patience, resilience, and gratitude. The Quran became her comfort, guiding her through emotions she couldn't express. When the world felt heavy, she would whisper, "Indeed, with hardship comes ease." And every time she whispered those words, she felt the divine presence closer than her own heartbeat. By the time she gave birth, she wasn't just a new mother, she was a new soul. The woman who once searched for peace had become the embodiment of it. Her child was born into a home filled with remembrance, and every call to prayer became a lullaby of divine love. Her journey was not simply about changing religion, it was about rediscovering the truth of her creation. Islam had not erased her past, it had redefined it. Every mistake, every tear, every moment of confusion had led her to this, to light, to clarity, to purpose. This story reminds us that guidance often arrives when we least expect it. Sometimes the heart must be broken open by life's trials to allow light to enter. For this woman, that moment came when she carried life within her, realizing that she too was being carried by the mercy of Allah. Her story teaches us that faith is not inherited, it is discovered. It is born when the soul decides to listen. And when it listens, it always finds its way home. There are moments in life when the heart begins to see what the eyes cannot. And this woman's story is one of those divine awakenings that changes everything from within. Her journey toward Islam did not begin with a dramatic event or a sudden realization, but rather with a quiet whisper that grew louder with every passing day of her pregnancy. She was 10 weeks along when something inside her began to stir, not just the child growing within her, but a longing that she could no longer ignore. It was as though every heartbeat of her baby was calling her closer to the truth, to something bigger than herself. Before this, she had lived her life like many others, busy, focused on worldly matters, chasing happiness that always seemed to slip through her fingers. Pregnancy has a way of slowing everything down, of making you reflect on the mysteries of life and the fragile line between existence and nothingness. Each time she felt the tiny flutter of life inside her, she was filled with both awe and fear, and she began to question where life truly comes from. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that such perfection could not exist by accident. She began to feel a yearning to understand the creator behind this miracle, the unseen power that had placed a living soul within her. Her search for answers brought her face to face with Islam, not through lectures or debates, but through observation. She had a friend who was Muslim, someone whose peace was visible even in times of difficulty. One day, she happened to see her friend praying not for show or routine, but with a sense of love, humility, and complete surrender that she had never witnessed before. Something deep within her broke open at that moment. The way her friend placed her forehead on the ground with tears in her eyes wasn't an act of weakness. It was strength, a kind of peace that no words could describe. That night, she couldn't sleep. The image of that prayer played over and over in her mind, and for the first time in her life, she felt that her soul was being spoken to directly. She began listening to the current out of curiosity, but what she heard didn't feel foreign. It felt familiar, as if her heart had been waiting for those words all along. The verses spoke of mercy, forgiveness, patience, and love, and she found herself crying without knowing why. It was as if something she had lost long ago had finally been returned to her, but her path wasn't easy. With a child growing inside her and her life about to change forever, fear often surrounded her. She worried about how her family would react, how society would see her, and whether she was strong enough to embrace a new faith while nurturing a new life. Yet every time she placed her hand on her belly, she remembered that Allah, the one who created her baby, was also guiding her through this transformation. She began to understand that faith does not mean life becomes easy. It means that you no longer face its hardships alone. She started praying quietly in her room, whispering words of surrender, and with every sujood, she felt the weight of her fears lighten. The peace she once admired in others began to fill her own heart. Her pregnancy became more than a biological process, it became a spiritual journey of rebirth. She realized that while she was nurturing a new soul, Allah was nurturing hers. The pain, the nausea, the fatigue all became acts of worship when done with the right intention. Every heartbeat of her baby reminded her of divine mercy, and every breath became a moment of gratitude. Through faith, she learned that surrendering to Allah doesn't mean losing control. It means finding true control through trust. As she prepared to bring her child into the world, she understood that she wasn't just becoming a mother, she was becoming a believer. Her conversion wasn't a change of religion, it was a return to her fetrah, the pure, innate connection to her creator that had always been there but was buried under the noise of life. And when her baby was finally born, she felt that Allah had given her not one, but two new lives, one in her arms and one within her soul. Her story is a reminder that guidance comes in the most unexpected moments, and that sometimes the path to truth begins with a whisper from the heart. It shows that faith isn't about knowing all the answers, but about trusting the one who does. She began her journey in fear, but ended it in peace because she realized that when you surrender to Allah, you never lose, you only gain. Her story is not just about conversion, it's about awakening. It teaches us that Islam doesn't demand perfection, it invites us to transform. And for her, that transformation began not in a mosque or a classroom, but in the quiet sanctuary of her own heart, where a mother's love and divine guidance met, and two souls, hers and her child's, began their journey toward the light together. In the early days of her pregnancy, she found herself caught between two worlds, the life she had always known, and the quiet calling of something far greater than herself. Everything around her seemed to slow down, as if Allah was giving her space to reflect and feel. The life growing inside her was not just a new beginning in the physical sense, but a spiritual awakening that she couldn't quite put into words. There were nights when she would lie awake, her hands resting on her stomach, feeling the faint rhythm of a heartbeat that wasn't her own. In those moments, she would wonder, who gave life to this tiny soul? It was a question that lingered and grew louder with every passing day. She began to look at the world differently, the rising of the sun, the rain falling from the sky, the miracle of breathing. Everything around her became a sign, a reminder of something greater than coincidence. She had lived much of her life chasing happiness through things that never lasted. Career, social validation, temporary pleasures, but none of it ever filled the emptiness that quietly existed within her. Now, for the first time, she felt that emptiness transforming into curiosity, and that curiosity into a need for truth. Her journey toward Islam was not driven by logic alone. It was born from the heart's hunger for peace, for meaning. She began to observe the Muslims around her, and what struck her most wasn't their words, but their actions. Their calmness in chaos, their patience in hardship, their consistency in prayer. It was her friend's prayer, however, that touched her the most. It was a simple moment, her friend standing, bowing, prostrating in complete humility before the Creator. But to her, it was profound. That single act of submission showed her a kind of strength that was completely different from the world's definition. It wasn't arrogance or dominance. It was serenity that came from surrender. She began to wonder what kind of faith makes someone kneel willingly, not out of fear, but out of love. That image stayed with her for days. It haunted her and comforted her at the same time. Eventually, she found herself searching online for answers about Islam, not because someone pushed her, but because her heart was being pulled toward it. When she heard the Quran for the first time, she couldn't understand the words, but she could feel their weight. There was something in the recitation that calmed her soul in ways she had never experienced before. It was as if her heart was recognizing something it had always known but had long forgotten. She wept as she listened, feeling the verses seep into her being, softening the places that life had hardened. Her conversion wasn't a decision made overnight. It was a series of moments stitched together by divine mercy, each one guiding her closer to the truth until she could no longer deny it. But her new faith came with challenges, both internal and external. She feared how her family and community would react. The idea of explaining her decision felt overwhelming, especially as she navigated the emotional and physical changes of pregnancy. There were days she questioned herself, wondering if she was strong enough to take this step, to build a new identity while carrying a new life. Yet, every time doubt crept in, she remembered the peace she had felt during those quiet moments of reflection, the unexplainable comfort that came from whispering the name of Allah. That peace became her anchor. She started praying in secret at first, learning how to bow and prostrate, fumbling through words, but meaning every single one of them. With each sujud, she felt lighter, as if every prostration was washing away a lifetime of confusion and replacing it with purpose. She realized that faith is not about perfection, it's about connection. It's about coming back to Allah again and again, no matter how broken or uncertain you feel. Her baby became a source of motivation rather than fear. She understood that she wasn't just bringing a child into the world, she was bringing that child into a life of faith, hope, and spiritual clarity. And through this realization, she found strength she didn't know she had. The more she learned about Islam, the more she recognized its beauty, the balance between mercy and justice, the emphasis on patience, and the profound understanding that this world is temporary. She began to see that every hardship, even her loneliness, was a form of divine training, a means of purifying her heart and preparing her for something greater. When she finally took her shahada, tears streamed down her face, not because she was sad to leave her old life behind, but because she felt she had finally come home. Islam didn't take anything from her. It gave her everything she had been searching for: peace, purpose, and a sense of belonging that no worldly attachment could ever provide. As she whispered her first prayers as a Muslim, she felt a new kind of love within her, one that connected her to Allah, to her unborn child, and to herself in the most profound way. She understood that she hadn't just converted to a new faith, she had awakened to the truth that had been written in her soul all along. And as her baby grew, So did her iman, reminding her that even in loss, confusion, and fear, Allah's guidance is never absent. It only waits for the heart that's ready to listen. As her pregnancy progressed, her connection to Islam deepened in ways that she could never have anticipated. Each stage of her journey became intertwined with her spiritual growth. When her body felt weak, she remembered that her strength came not from herself, but from the one who created her. When anxiety overwhelmed her, she would place her hand on her stomach and feel her baby's heartbeat, reminding her that every beat was a sign of divine care. This growing awareness changed the way she saw everything, from the challenges of her daily routine to the way she viewed life's struggles. She began to understand that true peace was not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. Islam taught her that every hardship carried meaning, and every tear shed in patience was known to Allah. Before embracing faith, she had often seen suffering as unfair, as something to resist or escape. Now she realized that pain was not punishment, it was purification. It was a means through which Allah draws the heart closer, softens it, and teaches it compassion. She started to view her pregnancy not as a test of endurance, but as an act of worship, one that connected her body and soul in devotion. Each moment of discomfort, each sleepless night became a reminder that the path to growth often comes wrapped in struggle. The Quran's verses began to speak directly to her. Words about patience, trust, and divine timing took on new meaning. It was as if Allah was personally addressing her fears and soothing her heart. She found comfort in knowing that the same Creator who fashioned her child was guiding her through every emotional and physical trial. Her transformation also reshaped her relationships. Her husband, though initially uncertain about her new faith, began to see the change in her. She became calmer, more forgiving, more reflective. The love between them deepened, not because everything became easier, but because their connection found a higher purpose. She no longer sought validation from him in the same way she once did. Instead, she began to see their marriage as a partnership in growth, a shared journey of learning, patience, and mercy. She often thought about how her baby would grow up watching her, and she wanted to be the kind of mother who led by example, someone whose life radiated faith, humility, and gratitude. The more she prayed, the more she felt her heart open in ways she had never experienced before. There were moments when she broke down in sujud, weeping not out of sadness, but out of overwhelming gratitude. Gratitude that Allah had chosen her from all the billions of people in the world to be guided at this precise moment in her life. Gratitude that her journey into motherhood was also her journey into belief. She reflected often on how Allah had used her pregnancy as a means of awakening, as if He was saying to her, as I am bringing a child to life within you, I am also bringing your heart back to life. This realization filled her with awe. She realized that every change, every challenge, and every act of surrender had a divine purpose. Even the moments of doubt had led her to greater clarity. Through faith, she discovered a new form of empowerment, not the kind the world preaches, which is rooted in control, but the empowerment that comes from surrender, from trusting Allah completely even when she didn't understand His plan. As her due date drew near, she found herself reflecting deeply on the journey she had walked, how it began with a simple observation of her friend praying and unfolded into a complete transformation of her heart. What struck her most was how gentle Allah's guidance had been. It was never forced, never rushed. It came in whispers, in small signs, in quiet realizations that built upon one another until she could no longer deny the truth. She often wondered why she hadn't seen it sooner, but she came to understand that everything happens when the heart is ready. Her story became proof to her that Allah's timing is always perfect. She realized that her conversion was not just about learning to practice a new faith, but about learning to live with awareness, to see Allah's presence in every breath, every heartbeat, every challenge, and every joy. Islam had given her a new lens through which to see the world, one that was rooted in balance and peace. She knew that motherhood would bring new trials, sleepless nights, and moments of uncertainty, but she no longer feared them. Instead, she embraced them as opportunities to grow closer to Allah. She understood that the same love that led her to Islam would sustain her through the trials of motherhood and beyond. And in that understanding, she found the deepest kind of peace. The peace that comes not from having a perfect life, but from knowing that no matter what happens, she is never alone. Her journey became a living testament to the beauty of divine guidance, the mercy that meets us where we are, and the truth that sometimes the most life changing transformations begin not with certainty, but with a single moment of surrender in the quiet moments after her baby was born. She often found herself reflecting on how her entire world had shifted in ways she could never have predicted. Holding her child for the first time felt like holding a divine reminder of mercy, proof that life itself is an expression of Allah's will. There was something deeply humbling about looking into her baby's eyes and realizing that this tiny being had been chosen as part of her journey toward faith. Each cry, each fragile breath reminded her that everything life, love, loss, and faith is interconnected. Her heart overflowed with gratitude, not only for the child she held, but for the transformation that had taken place within her soul. There were nights when exhaustion overwhelmed her, when fear of the unknown loomed large, but even in those moments, she felt a presence guiding her, reminding her that she was not alone. She would whisper prayers over her baby, her voice trembling with emotion, asking Allah to protect, guide, and bless this new life that had entered the world. Through motherhood, she discovered a new form of faith, one that wasn't only about belief, but about action, patience, and nurturing. She understood now that love, when rooted in faith, becomes worship. Every sleepless night spent caring for her child, every tear shed out of worry, became an act of devotion. This realization deepened her gratitude because she recognized that Allah had written a journey for her that was both challenging and beautiful, one that purified her heart in the most unexpected ways. She often thought back to the moment she first saw her Muslim friend praying. That single, quiet moment had changed everything. What had seemed like a simple act of worship to her friend had been, in reality, a divine invitation for her. She realized that sometimes Allah places guidance in front of us through people, actions, or moments that appear ordinary but carry extraordinary meaning. Her friend's prayer had opened a window in her heart, one that allowed the light of truth to pour in. Now, years later, when she stood in prayer herself, she could feel that same connection, that same surrender that had once captivated her from afar. But now it was her own. Each sujood felt like coming home, as if her soul was finally resting where it was always meant to be. The peace that once seemed unreachable now flowed through her like air, unseen yet vital. Still, faith didn't make her immune to hardship. There were times when she felt tested, when loneliness crept in, when the demands of motherhood felt too heavy, or when the whispers of self-doubt grew louder. But unlike before, she no longer faced these moments in despair. She knew that Allah was aware of every tear and every thought, that He understood her even when she couldn't find the words to express her feelings. This certainty became her refuge. It allowed her to approach life with a softness that came not from weakness, but from faith. She learned to turn her struggles into supplications, her exhaustion into remembrance, and her fears into reliance. Her relationship with her husband also evolved through this transformation. Before embracing Islam, she often sought comfort in his presence, expecting him to fill the void she felt within. But as her faith deepened, she began to understand that true love thrives not when we expect another human to complete us, but when we both turn to Allah together. She realized that when two hearts are connected through faith, their love becomes a reflection of divine mercy, not a source of dependency. Their home began to change. Peace replaced tension, gratitude replaced complaint, and forgiveness replaced pride. Her husband, witnessing her serenity and strength, began to feel curious about the faith that had transformed her. Slowly, their conversations shifted from worldly concerns to spiritual reflections. Together, they began to build a life centered on prayer, trust, and patience. Their home was no longer just a space for living. It became a sanctuary of remembrance. Every call to prayer became a reminder that no matter what life brought, they had a direction to turn to, a purpose to fulfill, and a creator who never abandoned them. She found immense joy in the small acts of faith, teaching her child to say Bismillah, sharing Quran recitations with her husband, and creating an environment filled with gratitude and peace. Through all of this, she realized that faith was not about perfection, but about progress, about returning to Allah again and again with sincerity. Now, as she looks back on her journey, she sees how every moment, every struggle, every tear, every unanswered question was part of a divine plan designed to bring her closer to truth. What once felt like loss had in reality been preparation for something far greater. Her conversion to Islam was not a single decision, it was a series of awakenings, each one teaching her to see life through the lens of submission, trust, and gratitude. She learned that Islam is not merely a set of rituals, but a way of living with awareness, seeing Allah's signs in everything, From the rising of the sun to the beating of her child's heart, she often smiled to herself, remembering how scared she once was to change, how uncertain she felt about surrendering her life to something she couldn't fully understand. But now, she realized that surrendering to Allah was not losing control. It was finally finding peace in knowing who truly controls everything. Her story became one of hope, a testament that guidance can reach anyone, anywhere, in any condition. Whether through joy or grief, through birth or loss, Allah calls every soul uniquely. She had once thought her pregnancy was about bringing new life into the world, but in truth, it was also about bringing her own soul back to life. Her journey taught her that faith is not something we stumble upon. It is something Allah plants in the heart, nourishes through trials, and blossoms when we finally say, "I trust you." In her heart, she carried not only her child, but also a newfound light, a light that would guide her, heal her, and remind her that no matter where her path led, she would never walk alone again.